what is Fortableed specifically, but more importantly, what is it about Fortableed that made you want to jump on today and kind of talk about this bigger topic?
But yeah, I think so. So just quickly recapping, as many folks know, Fortinet has had a few security vulnerabilities over the last several years that provided credentialed access into public connected FortiGates. So if you allowed admin access, if you allowed VPN, which of course they're regularly used for, there were several vulnerabilities that made it possible for threat actors to get access and in many cases create credentials on those FortiGates. And there were various, because there have been multiple exploits, there have been various paths for that to occur. I think the first one was, via, HTTPS, like, you could write config without having an account. And so of course the first thing threat actors did was they created a new user. Without actually being a user themselves. So that's where this started, right? A 2022 timeframe. And from that, we had a lot of devices that were compromised. Now, as we fast forward into June of this year, there was a gentleman who discovered a repository of that really looked like, okay, this is data from these public-facing internet FortiGates that is either A, being ready to be deployed, or I should say sold onto the market, or B, it's ready to be used in some sort of escalation. So that occurred, and I think one of probably the best websites out there, in my opinion, that kind of covers it is the Hudson Rock directory, where you can go out and you can search for an organization by domain. There are 73,932 compromised firewall URLs in their directory. And so you can actually see, okay, is this, does my organization happen to be one? Now, what's really interesting about this is the data that the researcher discovered was more complete data than should have been allowed based on previous attacks. So at a minimum, what we seem to be learning is that every one of these firewalls that's affected had their complete configuration downloaded. So there are accounts that they have for some of these FortiGates that had that had a secure password for that username, and the username was correctly encrypted within the system. And yet somehow they've been able to, well, not somehow, but they've been able to reverse that out. I've been saying a researcher, I should actually call him out. Vladimir Dashenko, I think he goes by Bob, if I remember correctly, is the guy who kind of first found it. He's put out some really great information. There's a lot of good information out there. Now, I think the other aspect of this is it's not just about compromising the firewall, because what they then did was they took any credentials that they found and they started to reverse the passwords out using a distributed GPU architecture so that they could actually begin cracking passwords. And it wasn't just FortiGate or Fortinet passwords. It was also passwords for things like Active Directory if that FortiGate was authenticating users. And so this is really just a launching point into the network. So that kind of summarizes, hopefully, Fortableed. If you happen to have FortiGates in your network, I cannot stress high enough, go out to the Hudson Rock. It's hudsonrock.com/Fortinet and search for any domains that your company uses, especially for credentials, and see if you're in that list. So I think that's the intro to Fortableed. It's a deep rabbit hole for sure.